I stared at the nursing home invoice on my desk, the amount due mocking me after everything I'd sacrificed. My name is Olivia Bennett, and last month I discovered my parents had given my entire inheritance, the family home, investments, and savings, to my sister Emma, who hadn't visited them in 8 years. Now their expensive care facility bills were addressed to me, the daughter who'd spent every Sunday by their bedsides. What happens when family loyalty becomes a one-way street? This is the story of how I rebuilt my dignity after betrayal and found success beyond the shadow of inherited wealth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The envelope seemed heavier than paper should be. Maybe it was the official nursing home logo embossed in the corner, or maybe it was what I knew had to be inside. I'd been expecting this bill, just not addressed to me. I set my coffee mug down on my modest kitchen counter, chipped laminate in a rental I could barely afford, and slid my finger under the seal. The paper inside was crisp and formal, detailing the outstanding balance for my parents' care, $42,975.93. My hands trembled slightly as I read the accompanying letter. Dear Ms. Bennett, as the designated responsible party for Harold and Martha Bennett, this notice serves as a reminder that payment for their premium care services is now 45 days past due. Responsible party? I'd never signed anything agreeing to this. My sister Emma was supposed to handle their finances. She'd been given everything specifically for this purpose. I grabbed my phone and pulled up my contact list, scrolling to Emma's name. My finger hovered over the call button, but I hesitated. Our last conversation 3 months ago had ended with her telling me I was obsessed with our parents' care and needed to get a life of my own. Easy for her to say from her beachfront condo in San Diego, purchased with money from selling our childhood home. Instead, I called Meadowbrook Care Center. This is Margaret in billing. How may I help you? Came the pleasant voice on the other end. Hi, this is Olivia Bennett. I've received an invoice for my parents' care, but there must be some mistake. I'm not the financial responsible party for their accounts. Let me check our records, Ms. Bennett. I heard keyboard clicks in the background. According to our files, you were designated as the financial contact last month by your sister, Emma Bennett. She provided your information and signed the transfer of responsibility forms. The room seemed to tilt sideways. She did what? The paperwork was processed on April 17th. Your sister indicated that as she lives out of state, you would be handling all matters related to your parents' care going forward. April 17th. The day after I'd called Emma to tell her dad had been diagnosed with vascular dementia and would need increased care. The day after I'd gently suggested she might want to visit while he still remembered who she was. I never agreed to this, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I can't afford these bills. My parents had significant savings and assets that were meant to cover their care. Margaret's voice softened with practiced sympathy. I understand this is difficult, Ms. Bennett. However, the financial responsibility form has been signed and processed. If there's been a misunderstanding between you and your sister, I'm afraid that's a family matter you'll need to resolve privately. Family matter, a polite way of saying it wasn't their problem. After ending the call, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the bill. My parents had been comfortable, not wealthy, but secure. Dad had worked for 35 years as an engineering manager, Mom as a school administrator. They'd saved diligently, invested wisely, and owned their home outright. There should have been more than enough to cover their care for years. 2 years ago, when Mom's Parkinson's had progressed to the point where they needed assistance, Emma and I had met with them to discuss options. Dad, still sharp then, had laid out their plans clearly. We've set everything up, he'd explained, showing us their will and financial documents. The house, our investments, everything will go to you girls to manage for our care. When we're gone, Whatever's left will be yours. Emma had nodded along, asking detailed questions about the portfolio's value and the house's equity. I'd focused on care options, researching facilities, and visiting potential places. When they'd finally moved into Meadowbrook, it had seemed perfect. Comprehensive care in a dignified setting. Dad had updated their will, putting everything in Emma's name for simplicity, he'd said. She has the financial background to manage it properly. I hadn't objected. Emma had an MBA and worked in investment banking. I taught high school English and could barely keep my student loan payments current. It had made sense then. Now, looking at the bill before me, nothing made sense anymore. I pulled out my laptop and checked my bank account. $3,571. 28. My next paycheck wouldn't arrive for 2 weeks, and most of that was already allocated to rent, utilities, and loan payments. There was no way I could cover even a fraction of the nursing home bill. My phone buzzed with a text from Meadowbrook's activities coordinator. Your dad had a great time at music therapy today. Thought you'd like to see this photo. Attached was an image of my father smiling, something that had become increasingly rare as his condition progressed. These moments were why I spent every Sunday at Meadowbrook, why I knew all the staff, by name, why I brought Mom her favorite lavender hand cream and read poetry to Dad from books he'd once loved, while Emma hadn't set foot in the facility since the day we'd moved them in. I needed answers. Opening my email, I composed a message to Emma. Received a $42,875 bill from Meadowbrook today. They say you transferred financial responsibility to me last month. Need to discuss this immediately. Please call me. Within minutes, my phone rang. Olivia, I was just about to call you. Emma's voice sounded artificially bright. How are the parents doing? Cut the small talk, Emma. Why? Am I getting their nursing home bill? A pause. Look, there's been a complication with their assets. What kind of complication? The market took a downturn, and some investments didn't perform as expected. So, sell something else. Liquidate another account. That's why they put you in charge of their finances. Another pause, longer this time. There's nothing left to liquidate, Liv. What are you talking about? Their portfolio was worth over $1 million. The house sold for $675,000. Even with Meadowbrook's costs, there should be plenty left. I had to diversify their investments. Some opportunities came up that required significant capital. Ice formed in my stomach. What opportunities? A real estate development in Arizona. A tech startup. They were solid investments. Liv. The returns would have more than covered Mom and Dad's expenses for the rest of their lives. Would have? Emma's sigh crackled through the phone. The development company filed for bankruptcy. The startup folded before going public. It happens in business. You take calculated risks. You gambled our parents' money? All of it? My voice had risen to a shout. That wasn't your money to gamble with, Emma. It was meant for their care. I was trying to grow their nest egg. No one could have predicted. Where's the house money, Emma? Over $500,000 doesn't just disappear. Her voice turned defensive. I used some of it for the investments. The rest went toward my condo as a secure asset. Property is always a sound investment. You bought yourself a beach condo with our parents' money? I could barely process what I was hearing. It's not like that. The condo is part of their portfolio, an investment that's actually appreciated in value. In your name. Well, yes, technically, but... And the nursing home bills? Why are those suddenly my responsibility? Emma's voice turned cool and businesslike. I've done everything I could to manage their finances. I can't conjure money out of thin air. You're there. You see them every week. It makes sense for you to handle this part now. I make $52,000 a year teaching high school, Emma. I rent a 1-bedroom apartment and drive a 12-year-old car. How exactly am I supposed to pay for premium nursing home care? You'll figure something out. Apply for Medicaid. Look into state assistance programs. Maybe they could move to a more affordable facility. My grip tightened on the phone. Moving them would be traumatic, especially for Dad. He's just starting to feel comfortable at Meadowbrook. And Medicaid applications take months, even if they qualify with the look-back period, which they might not since all their assets were transferred to you. I don't know what to tell you, Liv. This is just how things have worked out. The casualness in her voice, as if we were discussing a minor inconvenience rather than our parents' well-being, broke something inside me. No, Emma. This is how you've chosen to make things work out. You took everything, their savings, their home, their security, and you've left them with nothing. You've left me with an impossible burden. Don't be so dramatic. You've always been the dutiful daughter anyway, always needing their approval. I'm just being practical. Practical? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call stealing from our parents and abandoning them? I didn't steal anything. It was all legally transferred to me. Dad signed everything over himself. Because he trusted you to take care of them. My voice broke. When was the last time you even visited Mom and Dad? Do you know that Mom can barely hold a spoon now? That Dad sometimes doesn't remember who I am? While you've been enjoying their money, I've been watching them fade away. The line went quiet for a moment. When Emma spoke again, her voice was cold. I'm sorry you're upset, but this isn't my problem anymore. I've done what I could. Maybe, if you'd focused more on building a career instead of hovering around our parents, you'd be in a better position to help them now. The call ended before I could respond. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, tears of rage and disbelief streaming down my face. After several minutes, I wiped my eyes and returned to the nursing home bill on my table. Something Emma had said echoed in my mind. You've always been the dutiful daughter anyway, always needing their approval. It wasn't true. I hadn't stayed connected to our parents out of some desperate need for validation. I'd done it because I loved them, because family meant something to me beyond what I could get from them. But she was right about one thing. I'd never focused on building wealth or a high-powered career. I'd chosen teaching because I believed in the value of education, in helping shape young minds. I lived modestly, but had always considered my life rich in purpose. Now that choice felt like a liability. I looked around my small apartment, books lining every available shelf, papers from my students' latest essays stacked neatly for grading, photos of my parents in happier times displayed on the wall. What would I have to sacrifice to keep them safe and cared for now? My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Advanced Placement Exam Prep Session, 7 p.m. I'd volunteered to run extra study sessions for my senior English students preparing for their AP exams, hoping to boost their chances of college scholarships. An idea began to form. I opened my laptop again and navigated to a bookmarked page. National Teacher Grant for Educational Innovation. I'd been working on an application for weeks, developing a curriculum that combined classic literature with digital media production. The grant offered $75,000 to implement innovative teaching programs, with applications due in 3 days. I'd been hesitant to apply, doubting my project was innovative enough to stand out among thousands of submissions. Now, looking at the nursing home bill, I felt a new determination. This wasn't just about enhancing my teaching anymore. It was about finding a way to support my parents when everyone else had abandoned them. Opening my draft application, I began to revise with focused intensity. My project needed to be more than good. It needed to be exceptional. As I worked, I found myself drawing on emotions I'd kept bottled up. The frustration of being overlooked, the pain of familial betrayal, the fierce protectiveness I felt toward my vulnerable parents. I wrote until midnight, then set my alarm for 5 a.m. to continue before school. For the next 2 days, Every spare moment was dedicated to perfecting my application. When I finally submitted it on the third day, I felt a strange calm replace my anxiety. Whatever happened, I had channeled my pain into creating something meaningful. But the nursing home bill remained unpaid, and Meadowbrook would soon expect action. That evening, I visited my parents as usual. Dad was having a good day, his eyes lighting with recognition when I entered their shared room. "There's my Livy," he said, reaching for my hand. Mom smiled from her wheelchair by the window. Her movements limited, but her mind still sharp. "We missed you last Sunday," she said. I squeezed Dad's hand, feeling a pang of guilt. I'd missed my weekly visit for the first time in 2 years to finish the grant application. "I'm sorry. I was working on something important." "You're teaching?" Mom asked. "Yes," I said, not mentioning the financial crisis looming over us. No need to worry them when they could do nothing to help. "A special project." As I helped Mom with her dinner, a nurse's aide named Jasmine stopped by. "Ms. Bennett, could I speak with you when you have a moment?" In the hallway, Jasmine looked uncomfortable. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but the administration had a meeting today about your parents. If the bill isn't paid by the end of the month, they're considering transfer options." My heart sank. "What kind of transfer options?" "State-funded facilities. They're not like Meadowbrook." Her expression said everything, her words didn't. "Thank you for telling me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your parents are special to all of us," Jasmine added. "You're the only visitor they ever have, and you've been so good to the staff. We notice things like that." Back in my parents' room, I watched Dad doze in his recliner while Mom gazed out at the garden. They'd worked hard their entire lives, saved carefully, planned responsibly, only to have their security stripped away by the daughter they'd trusted. As I drove home, a peculiar determination settled over me. I might not have Emma's financial acumen or business connections, but I had something she lacked: persistence. The ability to work toward a goal without immediate rewards. The willingness to sacrifice for those I loved. I would find a way to keep my parents at Meadowbrook, to give them the care and dignity they deserved in their final years. And I would do it without compromising who I was or what I believed in. Opening my laptop that night, I began researching everything I could about elder care funding, patient rights, and legal options for financial responsibility. I created a spreadsheet of my expenses, identifying potential areas to cut costs. I looked into weekend tutoring opportunities to supplement my teaching salary. One tab in my browser led to another, and I found myself on a website for freelance curriculum development, something I'd done informally for years, but never considered as a serious income source. Schools and educational companies paid well for quality curriculum materials, it seemed. By 2 a.m., exhaustion finally overcame determination. As I closed my laptop, an email notification appeared. "Thank you for your interest in SmartLearn Educational Consulting." I'd filled out an application on their site hours earlier, almost automatically, while navigating through various opportunities. Now they wanted to schedule an interview for a curriculum developer position. The listed compensation made me blink twice to confirm I wasn't misreading due to fatigue. For the first time since receiving that nursing home bill, I felt something beyond anger and anxiety, a flicker of possibility. Perhaps there was a path forward that I hadn't yet considered, one where my teaching expertise could become more than just a modestly compensated passion. As I finally fell asleep, Emma's dismissive words echoed again. "Maybe if you'd focused more on building a career." Perhaps it wasn't too late to do exactly that, but on my own terms, without sacrificing. The values that had guided my choices all along. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The interview with SmartLearn Educational Consulting was scheduled for the following afternoon, a virtual meeting that I could attend during my lunch break at school. I spent the morning teaching Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby to my juniors, all while my mind raced with questions and calculations. How much could I realistically earn from curriculum development? Would it be enough to make a dent in my parents' nursing home bills? Between classes, I called Meadowbrook's billing department and negotiated a 2-week extension. The woman on the phone seemed sympathetic, but made it clear this was a one-time courtesy. After that, we'll need to discuss alternative arrangements. For your parents, she said gently. The weight of those words followed me throughout the day. Alternative arrangements, a polite euphemism for moving them to a state facility with shared rooms, overworked staff, and minimal amenities. The kind of place where dignity took a backseat to efficiency. At precisely noon, I locked my classroom door and set up my laptop on my desk. I had changed into a blazer I kept in my classroom closet for parent conferences, applied fresh lipstick, and arranged my teaching awards on the shelf behind me, small touches to project professionalism. The video call connected, revealing a woman in her 50s with stylish glasses and a warm smile. Olivia Bennett? I'm Patricia Winters, Educational Director at SmartLearn. Thank you for applying for our curriculum developer position. Thank you for considering me, I replied, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Your application was quite impressive, Patricia continued. 15 years of classroom experience, department chair for 7 years, and those student achievement scores are remarkable. Tell me, what prompted your interest in curriculum development at this stage of your career? I had prepared a standard answer about professional growth and new challenges, but something made me pause. Perhaps it was the genuine interest in Patricia's expression, or perhaps it was the emotional tumult of the past few days, but I found myself offering a more honest response. I've always believed that education is about more than what happens in a single classroom, I began. For years, I've created supplementary materials for my colleagues, designed cross-disciplinary units, and mentored new teachers in curriculum planning. It's work I love and seem to have a talent for. I took a breath. But recently, I've also realized that I need to expand my professional horizons. There are financial considerations that make additional income necessary. Patricia nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate your candor, Olivia. Many educators find themselves at similar crossroads. The passion for teaching rarely aligns with the financial compensation it deserves. The interview continued for 40 minutes, covering my teaching philosophy, curriculum design experience, and familiarity with various educational technologies. Patricia seemed particularly interested in my approach to making classic literature relevant to digitally native students. We're especially impressed with the digital media component you've integrated into your literature curriculum, she said. That's precisely the kind of innovative thinking we're looking for. As the interview wound down, Patricia's expression became more serious. Normally, we start new developers with a few small projects to assess their capabilities, but given your experience and portfolio, I'd like to propose something different. My heart quickened. I'm listening. We've recently secured a contract with the Northeastern Regional School District to develop a comprehensive English language arts curriculum for grades 9 to 12. It's a significant project with a tight timeline. Complete. Redesign with digital integration, assessment tools, and teacher resources. That sounds fascinating, I said, genuinely interested despite my primary focus on the financial implications. It would be a substantial commitment, Patricia continued. We typically assign such projects to a team, but your background seems uniquely suited to lead this effort. The compensation would be $85,000 for the completed curriculum, with the first installment of $25,000 upon signing the contract. I managed to maintain my professional composure, but internally, my mind was reeling. $85,000 would cover my parents' current nursing home bills and provide a cushion for upcoming months, and $25,000 upfront could address the immediate crisis. That's certainly compelling, I said carefully. What would the timeline look like? 4 months for the complete package, with preliminary materials due in 6 weeks. It would require evenings, weekends, and likely some time off from your teaching position. My thoughts immediately went to my classroom of students preparing for AP exams and end-of-year assessments. I've made commitments to my current students that I need to honor, I said. I couldn't step away from teaching entirely at this point in the school year. Patricia studied me for a moment, then smiled. Your dedication to your students speaks volumes, Olivia. Perhaps we could adjust the timeline slightly or provide additional support for certain components. Why don't you think about it, and we can discuss specifics tomorrow? I'll send over the project details this afternoon for your review. That would be perfect. Thank you. After the call ended, I sat at my desk, stunned by this unexpected turn of events. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period, and students began to filter back into the hallway. I quickly changed back into my regular teaching clothes and opened the classroom door, greeting my seniors with what must have been a slightly dazed expression. "You okay, Ms. Bennett?" asked Miguel, one of my most perceptive students. "Just had some unexpected news," I said. "Nothing to worry about." "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" persisted Aisha from the back row. I considered the question. "Potentially very good," I admitted, "but also challenging." "Those usually go together," Miguel observed wisely. As I guided my students through their analysis of Toni Morrison's Beloved, part of my mind was already calculating logistics. How many hours could I realistically devote to curriculum development without shortchanging my students? Could I request unpaid leave for the final weeks of school once AP exams were completed? Would the school administration support such an arrangement? After my last class, I drove directly to Meadowbrook to visit my parents. Dad was having a physical therapy session when I arrived, so I sat with Mom in the garden courtyard, her wheelchair positioned to catch the afternoon sun. "You look distracted," Mom observed, her voice soft but still perceptive. I squeezed her fragile hand. "Just busy with school," I said, unwilling to burden her with financial worries. She studied my face with the keen insight that 30 years of motherhood had perfected. "There's something else. I can always tell when you're keeping things from me, Olivia, ever since you were little." I smiled, despite myself. Even with her body failing her, Mom's emotional intuition remained razor-sharp. "I might have a new professional opportunity," I admitted. "A curriculum development project. It would be challenging but rewarding." "You'd be wonderful at that," she said without hesitation. "You've always had a gift for teaching in ways that reach different kinds of learners. Your father and I used to read your lesson plans when you'd leave them on the dining room table during your first years of teaching. So creative, so thoughtful." The memory caught me off guard. My parents, quietly taking an interest in my work while I wasn't looking. "You read my lesson plans?" "Of course we did. We were so proud of how you approach teaching, not just covering material, but finding ways to make it matter to your students." Her eyes grew distant with memory. "Remember how upset you were when budget cuts eliminated the field trip to see Hamlet performed? You brought in professional actors to do scenes in your classroom instead." I did remember. I'd used my entire month's discretionary income to hire 3 actors from the local theater company, believing that Shakespeare should be experienced, not just read. "I didn't realize you knew about that." "We kept track of all the special things you did," Mom said. "Even when we didn't say it directly." A nurse appeared at the entrance to the garden. "Mrs. Bennett, time for your medication." Mom sighed. "Duty calls." As I wheeled her back toward the building, she patted my hand. "Whatever this new opportunity is, you should pursue it if it interests you. You've always put others first, your students, your father, and me. It's time you did something for yourself, too." If only she knew that this opportunity wasn't about self-fulfillment, but about ensuring she and Dad could remain in the place they'd come to call home. That evening, The project documents arrived from SmartLearn. I spread them across my kitchen table, reviewing the scope, expectations, and deliverables. The work was substantial, far more extensive than I'd initially realized. Creating a 4-year, standards-aligned curriculum with integrated digital components and comprehensive assessment tools would typically be tackled by a team of developers, not a single person. For a moment, doubt crept in. Could I really do this alone while maintaining my teaching responsibilities? Was I setting myself up for failure by taking on too much? I thought of Emma's dismissive words about my career choices, and something hardened within me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about proving something to myself. I opened a new document and began to outline a work schedule. Dawn hours before school, evening work sessions, weekend deep dives, strategic use of personal days. If I was meticulously organized and focused, it might just be possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine at Meadowbrook. "Your dad kept asking for you today. Said he had something important to tell you." Concern flooded through me. Dad's good days were becoming rarer, his moments of clarity more precious. Whatever he needed to tell me might be lost if I waited until the weekend. I texted back, "Thanks, Jasmine. I'll come by tomorrow after school." The next morning, I arrived at school early to grade papers that would otherwise have to wait. Between classes, I called Patricia at SmartLearn to discuss the project parameters. "I've reviewed everything," I told her. "It's ambitious, but I believe I can deliver what you need. However, I'd like to propose a slight modification to the timeline." "I'm listening," Patricia said. "I can begin immediately with the framework development and the 9th and 10th grade curricula. For the 11th and 12th grade components, I'd like to bring in a colleague to collaborate, someone whose judgment I trust completely and who has particular expertise in AP preparation." There was a pause on the line. "That wasn't our original intention," Patricia said cautiously. "I understand, but it would ensure the highest quality work while meeting your deadlines. Melanie Rodriguez has 15 years of experience with AP, literature, and a doctorate in curriculum development. We've collaborated on projects before and share a similar educational philosophy." I took a breath. I'd still take primary responsibility for the entire project, but her involvement would strengthen the upper-level components. After a thoughtful silence, Patricia agreed. "Send me her credentials today, and if they're as impressive as you suggest, we can adjust the contract accordingly." Relief washed over me. Melanie had been my mentor when I first started teaching and remained a close friend. I had already texted her the night before about the possibility, and she had responded with immediate enthusiasm. "One more thing," I added. "Would it be possible to increase the initial payment to $30,000? The project scope is larger than I initially understood." Another pause. "I'd need to get approval from finance, but given the expanded scope we've discussed, I believe I can justify it. I'll let you know this afternoon." By the end of the school day, everything was arranged. The contract would arrive by courier the following morning, with the first payment to be deposited within 3 business days of signing. I felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and terror. I had committed to a mammoth professional undertaking during one of the most emotionally turbulent periods of my life. As promised, I drove to Meadowbrook after school. Dad was sitting in his room, looking out the window when I arrived. "Livy," he said, his face brightening with recognition. "I was hoping you'd come." "Jasmine said you wanted to tell me something," I said, sitting beside him. He looked momentarily confused. Then his expression cleared. Yes, I found something. Been looking for it for days whenever my mind is working properly." He reached into the drawer of his bedside table and pulled out a worn leather portfolio. "Your mother and I wanted you to have this." I accepted the portfolio, curious. Inside was a collection of papers, legal documents by the look of them. As I scanned the top page, my heart stuttered. It was a deed to a property I didn't recognize, dated 15 years earlier. What is this, Dad? His eyes were clear, focused in a way they often weren't these days. The cabin at Lake Henderson. We bought it as an investment property when you girls were teenagers. Been renting it out through a management company ever since. Good income stream. He tapped the paper with a finger that trembled slightly. It's in a separate trust, not part of the assets we transferred to Emma. I stared at him, trying to process this information. You have another property? One that Emma doesn't know about? He nodded, a flash of his old shrewdness crossing his face. Your mother and I. We had concerns about putting everything in Emma's hands. She's always been impulsive with money. But she was so insistent, and we were tired of managing everything. He sighed. We kept this separate, meant it for you. My throat tightened with emotion. Why didn't you tell me before? Didn't want to create friction between you girls, and we thought there would be time, before things got worse. He gestured vaguely at his head, acknowledging his cognitive decline. The rental income goes into a separate account. Details are all there. He pointed at the portfolio. Should be enough to help with. Whatever's happened with the other. Money. A chill ran through me. You know something's wrong with your finances? Dad's expression turned sad. Bills overdue. Staff talking when they think I can't hear. And Emma. She hasn't visited in so long. He reached for my hand. You're here every week, though. Always been the dependable one. Tears stung my eyes. I'm taking care of it, Dad. Don't worry. He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. I know you are, Livy. That's why we kept this for you. Your mother and I. We've always seen how hard you work, how responsible you are, even when we didn't say it. I leafed through the portfolio, finding bank statements, tax records, and information about the property management company. According to the most recent statement, the cabin generated $2,800 in monthly rental income after management fees. It wasn't enough to cover the entire nursing home cost, but combined with my teaching salary and the curriculum project, it might just be sustainable. Thank you, I whispered, emotion making it hard to speak. Dad's gaze had drifted back to the window, his moment of clarity already beginning to fade. Beautiful day, he murmured. Your mother always loved spring. I stayed with him until he dozed off, then went to find Mom in the community room. She was playing cards with another resident, her movements slow but her mind engaged. When she saw me, she smiled knowingly. He told you about the cabin, she said, not a question. I nodded, taking the seat beside her. You knew he was going to give me the portfolio? We discussed it last week during one of his good moments. We've been worried. She laid down a card carefully. We may not always understand what's happening around us anymore, but we notice things. The cabin income will help, I said, but I'm also working on other solutions. The curriculum project? Mom asked. Yes, it's a big opportunity. I signed the contract this afternoon. Pride shone in her eyes. I always knew you'd find a way to share your gifts beyond your classroom someday. That night, I spread all the documents across my kitchen table, the curriculum project details, the nursing home bills, the cabin portfolio. For the first time since receiving that unexpected invoice, I felt a sense of control returning. There was a path forward, challenging, but feasible. I texted Melanie to confirm our first planning session for the weekend, then created a detailed project timeline. The work would be intense, but with the cabin income providing some financial breathing room, I could approach it methodically rather than desperately. Just as I was about to close my laptop, an email notification appeared, a message from the National Teacher Grant Committee. Your application for educational innovation funding. My pulse quickened as I opened it, though I reminded myself that the odds of receiving the grant were slim. The message was brief, but stunning. We are pleased to inform you that your project has been selected as a finalist for this year's National Teacher Grant for Educational Innovation. The final selection process will include a presentation to our committee. Please see attached details regarding next steps. I read the email twice, unable to believe that another potential door had opened. Finalist status didn't guarantee the $75,000 grant, but it meant I was among the top 10 candidates from thousands of applicants nationwide. The presentation was scheduled for 3 weeks away, just as I would be deep in the Smart Learn project. The timing couldn't be more challenging, but the potential reward was too significant to ignore. I opened a new document and began outlining my presentation, ideas flowing despite the late hour. The project I'd proposed, a curriculum that bridged classical literature with digital media production, had been conceived before my financial crisis, born from genuine pedagogical passion rather than necessity. Perhaps that authentic foundation was what had made it stand out to the selection committee. As I worked, a realization gradually crystallized. The skills I'd developed throughout my teaching career, creativity, organization, communication, adaptability, were valuable far beyond my classroom. The expertise I'd honed while earning a modest salary in a frequently undervalued profession had commercial and professional worth I'd never fully recognized. Emma's dismissive words came back to me. Maybe if you'd focused more on building a career. She had equated career success with financial accumulation, viewing my dedication to teaching as a professional limitation. But what if my career wasn't limited, just different from what she valued? I closed my laptop at midnight, mind still buzzing with ideas but body demanding rest. As I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and was surprised to see something I hadn't noticed in days. I was smiling. Not from happiness exactly, but from a growing sense of possibility and determination. The nursing home crisis that had initially seemed like an insurmountable betrayal was unexpectedly forcing me to recognize and leverage strengths I'd taken for granted. The path ahead would be grueling, balancing teaching, curriculum development, grant, preparation, and parent care, but for the first time I felt equal to the challenge. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, mind clear and focused despite the short night's sleep. I dressed carefully, selecting an outfit that projected confidence, and arrived at school early to prepare my classroom. When my first students arrived, I greeted them with genuine enthusiasm. "Ms. Bennett, you seem different today," observed Layla, one of my most perceptive seniors. "Do I?" I asked, arranging the day's handouts on my desk. Layla studied me. "Yeah, you look like someone who just figured something out." She tilted her head curiously. "What changed?" I considered her question thoughtfully. "I think I finally recognized that sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as insurmountable problems." "That's deep, Ms. B," said Miguel, joining the conversation. "So, what was your insurmountable problem?" I smiled at their curiosity. Let's just say I was underestimating myself in ways I didn't even realize. But that's changing. As my classroom filled with students, I felt a renewed appreciation for the skills I'd developed in this space over 15 years. The ability to engage diverse learners, to break complex ideas into manageable components, to adapt when planned approaches weren't working. These same capabilities would now serve me in addressing my parents' needs and expanding my professional horizons. The curriculum project and grant opportunity weren't just financial lifelines. They were chances to redefine my understanding of what my career could be, on my own terms rather than anyone else's. The morning after discovering my father's hidden trust, I arrived at school early to meet with Principal Garcia. I needed to discuss my upcoming professional commitments and ensure they wouldn't interfere with my responsibilities to my students. His calendar showed no appointments before the first bell, so I knocked on his open door. "Olivia," he greeted me with genuine warmth. In my 15 years at Roosevelt High, Lawrence Garcia had been a consistently supportive administrator who valued teacher initiative. "What brings you in so early?" I closed the door and took a seat across from his desk. I wanted to discuss a professional opportunity that's recently come my way and how it might affect my teaching schedule. His eyebrows rose with interest. I'm listening. I explained the curriculum development project with SmartLearn, emphasizing that my first priority remained my students' success, particularly as AP exams approached. I've worked out a schedule that would allow me to maintain all my current teaching responsibilities through exam season, I continued. After that, I'm hoping to use my remaining personal days for concentrated work on the project. Principal? Garcia studied me thoughtfully. This is quite an opportunity, Olivia. Prestigious and lucrative. He leaned forward. But I know you. There's more to this sudden career expansion than professional development, isn't there? His perceptiveness caught me off guard. We had a good professional relationship, but I hadn't expected such personal insight. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. My parents' care situation has become complicated. They need financial support that wasn't anticipated. He nodded, his expression compassionate without being pitying. Family responsibilities have a way of appearing when we least expect them. He glanced at my proposed schedule. Your plan looks thoroughly considered. I don't see any issues with you using your personal days as outlined. Your AP students will have completed their exams by then. Thank you, I said, relief evident in my voice. I do have one concern, he added. This is a substantial professional undertaking on top of your already demanding teaching load. Are you certain you can manage both without compromising your well-being? The question was asked with genuine concern rather than doubt in my capabilities. It will be challenging, I admitted. But I've developed a detailed plan, and I've arranged for Melanie Rodriguez to collaborate on portions of the project. A wise choice, he nodded. Melanie is excellent. He thought for a moment. I might be able to offer additional support. Would it help if we reassigned some of your administrative duties temporarily? Perhaps Rebecca could take over department meeting facilitation for the remainder of the semester. The offer was unexpected and enormously helpful. Department chair responsibilities consumed several hours each week that could now be directed toward the curriculum project. That would be incredibly beneficial, I said gratefully. Consider it done. He made a note on his calendar. And Olivia, I'd like you to know that this curriculum project could potentially open doors within our district as well. We've been discussing the need for curriculum modernization at the administrative level. Your experience with SmartLearn could position you for leadership in that initiative if you're interested. I hadn't considered how this project might advance my career within the school system. I'd certainly be interested in those conversations, I said. As I left his office, I felt a small weight lifted from my shoulders. The support from my administrator validated my decision to pursue the curriculum project while maintaining my teaching responsibilities. It was one small piece of a complex puzzle falling into place. The courier arrived with the SmartLearn contract during my second period class. I signed it during lunch and arranged for immediate return delivery. By that afternoon, I had confirmation that the contract was finalized, with payment to be deposited within 3 business days. After school, I drove to the address listed for the property management company that handled my parents' Lake Henderson cabin. The office was located in a small strip mall on the outskirts of town, a modest space with a receptionist desk and 2 private offices visible through interior windows. I'm Olivia Bennett, I explained to the receptionist, a young woman with a practical ponytail and efficient demeanor. My parents are Harold and Martha Bennett. I recently learned they own a rental property managed by your company, and I'd like to discuss it. She tapped at her computer, then looked up with recognition. Yes, the Lake Henderson cabin. Let me get Mr. Russo for you. A few minutes later, I was seated across from Anthony Russo, a man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed beard and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Ms. Bennett, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've worked with your parents for many years now. It seems they kept this property quite separate from their other affairs, I said. Mr. Russo nodded. Your father was quite explicit about that. The cabin was purchased as a long-term investment with specific intentions. He pulled a file from his cabinet. According to our records, the property has been continuously rented for the past 14 years, with rental income deposited directly into a trust account accessible only by your parents, and now by you as the designated successor trustee. Successor trustee? This was news to me. Yes, your parents updated the trust documents about 18 months ago, naming you as successor trustee in the event they were unable to manage their affairs. He slid a document across the desk. Here's the amendment. As you can see, it's been properly executed and notarized. I scanned the legal document, recognizing my parents' signatures at the bottom. The timing was significant. 18 months ago would have been shortly after my mother's Parkinson's diagnosis, when they were beginning to confront the reality of their health challenges. The current tenant has been leasing the property for 3 years, Mr. Russo continued. They're on a 2-year lease with 18 months remaining. The monthly rent is $3,400, from which we deduct our management fee of $340, property taxes, and insurance premiums. The net deposit to the trust account averages $12,800 monthly. This aligned with the bank statements I'd found in my father's portfolio. What condition is the property in? Excellent. We conduct quarterly inspections and handle all maintenance issues promptly. It's one of our most desirable properties, lakefront with modern amenities. Your parents invested in a major renovation 5 years ago, which significantly increased its rental value and will enhance resale value should you ever decide to sell. The thought of selling hadn't occurred to me. I have no immediate plans to sell. My focus is ensuring the rental income continues to support my parents' needs. A commendable priority, Mr. Russo said with approval. The trust was specifically structured as an additional safeguard for their care expenses. He hesitated slightly. If I may ask, has something changed with their financial situation? Your father usually handles all communication regarding the property. I considered how much to share with this stranger, despite his long professional relationship with my parents. My father's health has declined significantly. He has vascular dementia. My mother has Parkinson's. They're both in a care facility now, and I'm taking over management of their affairs. Understanding dawned in Mr. Russo's expression. I see. I'm very sorry to hear that. Your father is a thoughtful, intelligent man. He spoke often about his concerns for future care needs. He pulled another document from the file. Perhaps this will be useful to you now. It's access information for the trust account where the rental income is deposited. I accepted the paper, feeling a surge of gratitude toward my father's foresight. Even as his mind began to fail him, he had created this safety net, anticipating potential problems with the assets he'd reluctantly placed in Emma's hands. Thank you for your help, Mr. Russo. I'd like to continue the management arrangement as it stands. Of course. We'll update our contact information to direct all future correspondence to you. He handed me his business card. Please don't hesitate to call if you have any questions or concerns about the property. As I drove home, I called the bank listed on the trust document and verified the account balance, $47,652. 81. The accumulated rental income from periods when care expenses had been covered by my parents' other assets now all gone. It wasn't enough for long-term security, but it was enough to keep my parents at Meadowbrook while I developed more sustainable solutions. That evening, Melanie arrived at my apartment with Thai food and boundless enthusiasm for our curriculum project. In her mid-50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and perpetual energy, she had been a mentor to me when I started teaching and remained one of the most innovative educators I knew. This is exactly the kind of project I've been hoping would come along, she said, spreading containers across my coffee table. The chance to reimagine high school English for the digital age, it's a dream opportunity. I'm grateful you agreed to collaborate, I said, handing her a glass of wine. I couldn't manage this alone, especially with everything else happening. Speaking of which, she said, studying me closely, how are you really doing with all this? Your parents' situation, your sister's betrayal, this sudden professional pivot. It's a lot to process at once. I sighed, appreciating her directness. It's overwhelming if I think about it all at once, so I'm trying to break it down into manageable pieces. Right now, I'm focused on securing their immediate care needs and starting this project strong. Classic Olivia approach, Melanie nodded. Methodical and practical, even in crisis. She took a bite of pad thai. But don't forget to acknowledge the emotional impact, too. What your sister did was a profound betrayal. I'm saving those feelings for when I have time to properly process them, I said with a wry smile. Currently scheduled for sometime next year. Melanie laughed. At least you haven't lost your sense of humor? Her expression turned serious. You know, when you told me about this situation, my first thought was how fundamentally unfair it is. But my second thought was that if anyone has the resilience and capability to turn this crisis into opportunity, it's you. I'm not feeling particularly resilient at the moment, I admitted, just desperate and determined. Those work, too, she said pragmatically. Now let's map out this curriculum development strategy. I've been thinking about an integrated approach that spirals key concepts across all 4 years. We worked for 3 hours, outlining the curriculum framework and establishing our collaborative workflow. Melanie's expertise in AP literature complemented my strengths in engaging reluctant readers and integrating technology. By the time she left, we had a solid foundation for the project and a detailed schedule for the coming weeks. The next morning, I checked my bank account before heading to school and found the first installment from SmartLearn had been deposited, $30,000, as negotiated. I immediately transferred $25,000 to cover my parents' overdue nursing home bill, then called Meadowbrook's billing department to confirm the payment. Thank you, Ms. Bennett, said the billing coordinator. This payment brings the account current. Will you be managing your parents' financial affairs going forward? Yes, I said firmly. Please direct all future billing inquiries to me. And how will subsequent payments be arranged? Your parents' care costs average $2,300 monthly. I had calculated this carefully over the past few days. I'll establish automatic payments from their trust account for $2,800 monthly. The remainder will come from my personal account until more permanent arrangements are made. With the immediate financial crisis addressed, I could now focus on developing sustainable solutions. The grant finalist presentation was 3 weeks away, the bulk of the curriculum project due in 4 months, and my parents' care needs ongoing indefinitely. The challenge was substantial, but no longer seemed insurmountable. That afternoon, as I guided my students through a close reading exercise, I found myself applying the same analytical skills to my own situation. Just as we identified patterns and turned points in literature, I could now see the narrative structure of my recent experience. The inciting incident of the nursing home bill, the complication of Emma's betrayal, the unexpected resolution through the curriculum opportunity, and the discovery of my father's hidden trust. But unlike a finished novel, my story was still unfolding, with many chapters yet to be written. The question was whether I would remain a reactive character, responding to events as they occurred, or become the protagonist who shaped her own destiny. After school, I visited my parents as planned. Mom was having a difficult day, her tremors, more pronounced than usual, making conversation challenging. Dad was in better spirits, recognizing me immediately when I entered their room. "Livy, there's my girl," he said, patting the chair beside his recliner. "Did you look into that cabin business?" "I did, Dad. I met with Mr. Russo yesterday. Everything is arranged for the rental income to help with your expenses here." Relief visibly washed over him. Good, good. Been worried about that. Can't seem to keep things straight in my head these days. He glanced toward Mom, who was being assisted by a nurse. Your mother needs to stay here. They take good care of her. Both of you are staying right here, I assured him. I've taken care of the bills. His brow furrowed with concern. Must be expensive. Don't want to be a burden on you, Livy. You're not a burden, Dad. I'm putting together some new professional opportunities that will help cover the costs. I squeezed his hand. You and Mom took care of me for 18 years. It's my turn now. He studied me with surprising lucidity. Always knew you'd make us proud. Different way than Emma, but just as important. His gaze drifted toward the window. Where is Emma these days? Haven't seen her in so long. I hesitated, unsure how much to share about Emma's actions. She's in San Diego. Her work keeps her busy. He murmured, a shadow crossing his face. Was afraid she might not handle things properly. That's why we kept the cabin separate. He turned back to me, his expression apologetic. Should have told you sooner. Memory's not reliable anymore. It's okay, Dad. We're figuring things out. We sat together quietly, watching as the nurse helped Mom back to her chair by the window. Despite her physical struggles, Mom's eyes remained alert, taking in our conversation even when she couldn't easily participate. Have you spoken to your sister? She asked when the nurse left, her voice strained but determined. Briefly, I said, when I received the nursing home bill. Mom's face reflected a complex mixture of emotions: disappointment, resignation, concern. She's always been driven by different values. We tried to teach you both the importance of family, of integrity, but... She trailed off, then rallied. You can't force someone to become what they're not. Did you know she would mishandle your finances? I asked, the question that had been troubling me. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance laden with meaning. We had concerns, Mom admitted. Emma has always been charming and persuasive, but impulsive with money. It's why your father created the separate trust for the cabin. Yet you still put everything else in her name, I pointed out, unable to keep a hint of frustration from my voice. Dad sighed heavily. She convinced us it was the sensible choice. Said she had the financial expertise, the business connections, made it sound like she could grow our savings while managing the care expenses. He looked down at his hands. I was already having memory problems. Felt like I was losing control. Maybe I wanted to believe she could handle everything better than I could. The admission was painful to hear, my proud, capable father acknowledging his vulnerability, his susceptibility to Emma's persuasion as his cognitive abilities began to decline. It's not your fault, I said firmly. Emma took advantage of your trust. We should have involved you in those decisions, Mom said. But we didn't want to burden you. You were so dedicated to your teaching, to your students. Emma made it seem like she was doing us all a favor by taking on the financial responsibility. The irony was striking. Their attempt to spare me had ultimately created a greater burden, one that now threatened to reshape my entire career and financial future. I'm handling it, I assured them. And actually, some good may come from this situation. I've been presented with professional opportunities I might never have pursued otherwise. Mom studied me with maternal insight. You've always allowed yourself to be underestimated, Olivia. By us, by Emma, perhaps even by yourself. Her trembling hand reached for mine. Maybe it's time for that to change. Her words resonated with something that had been forming in my own mind. The recognition that I had accepted others' perceptions of my potential for too long. In Emma's narrative, I was the dutiful but unambitious sister whose career choice reflected limited aspirations. In my parents' eyes, I was the reliable daughter who needed protection from financial complexities. In my own self-perception, I was primarily a dedicated teacher whose value was measured by my impact on students rather than by professional achievement or financial success. None of these perspectives fully captured my capabilities or potential. The curriculum project and grant opportunity were already forcing me to reimagine what my professional identity could encompass. Perhaps this family crisis was catalyzing a long overdue reassessment of my own limitations and possibilities. As I prepared to leave, promising to return over the weekend, the nursing director stopped me in the hallway. "Ms. Bennett, I wanted to let you know how much we appreciate your involvement with your parents' care. The financial situation has been resolved with billing, and we're delighted they'll be staying with us." "Thank you for your patience during the transition," I said. "I'm now the primary contact for all matters related to their care." She nodded. "We've updated their records accordingly. I should mention, we're conducting our annual family satisfaction survey next week. Your input would be valuable, especially regarding any suggestions for enhancing their experience here." "I'd be happy to participate," I said. "My parents' comfort and dignity are my highest priorities." "That's evident in your consistent presence here," she said warmly. "Not all residents receive such dedicated family support." Her words stayed with me as I drove home, a counterpoint to Emma's dismissive characterization of my visits as hovering. What Emma saw as excessive attachment, the professional caregivers recognized as essential emotional support. The contrasting perspectives highlighted the fundamental value difference between us. Emma prioritized financial advancement and independence, while I valued connection and care. Neither approach was inherently superior, but the consequences of each were becoming increasingly clear. Emma's pursuit of financial opportunity had led to the loss of our parents' security. My commitment to care had positioned me to reconstruct that security, albeit at significant personal cost. That evening, I worked on the curriculum project until midnight, developing the conceptual framework for the 9th grade component. The work was challenging, but energizing. Drawing on pedagogical approaches I'd refined over years of classroom experience, I could see how my teaching methodology could be scaled to impact thousands of students beyond my own classroom. As I finally prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "We need to talk about the nursing home situation. Call me when you can." I stared at the message, surprised by her initiative after our confrontational last conversation. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the distance that protected me from her manipulative tendencies. But practical considerations won out. We were still legally connected through our parents' care, and communication was necessary, however difficult. I responded simply, "I've addressed the immediate billing issue. What specifically do you want to discuss?" Her reply came quickly. "How are you covering the costs? And have you considered more affordable options for their care?" The implication that I should downgrade our parents' care to accommodate the financial disaster she had created sparked immediate anger. I took a deep breath before responding. "Their care arrangements will remain unchanged. I've secured appropriate funding. We can discuss details tomorrow evening if you're available to call at 8 p.m. my time." "Fine. Tomorrow at 8, she replied. I set the phone aside, mentally preparing for the conversation ahead. Emma would undoubtedly have strategies, suggestions, and rationalizations prepared. She was skilled at reframing situations to minimize her responsibility and maximize her advantage. But I was no longer the easily overlooked sister accepting her peripheral role in family decisions. The stakes were too high, and my responsibility too clear. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized something had fundamentally shifted in my self-perception. I was no longer approaching this situation from a position of defensive reaction, but from one of proactive determination. The professional opportunities before me, combined with the responsibility for my parents' welfare, had catalyzed a transformation in how I viewed my own agency and capabilities. The inheritance that had been redirected to Emma no longer seemed like the defining factor in this family drama. Something more valuable was emerging from this crisis, my recognition of strengths I had always possessed but never fully acknowledged or leveraged. That realization, more than any financial resource, would shape the chapters of my story yet to be written. At precisely 8 p.m., my phone rang with Emma's incoming call. I had spent the day teaching, working on the curriculum project, during my planning period, and mentally preparing for this conversation. I answered on the third ring, determined to maintain composure regardless of where the discussion led. "Hello, Emma." "Olivia." Her voice carried its usual confident tone. "Thanks for making time to talk. I've been thinking about our parents' situation, and I believe we need to develop a more sustainable approach." The phrasing was typical Emma, positioning herself as the rational problem solver despite having created the problem in the first place. I sat at my kitchen table, notes prepared for the conversation. "I'm interested to hear your thoughts," I said neutrally. "I've been researching alternative care facilities," she began. "There's a state-subsidized option about 30 miles from you that costs nearly 60% less than Meadowbrook. The reviews aren't stellar, but it covers the basics." I took a measured breath. "Moving them is not an option I'm considering. Dad's dementia makes transitions extremely disruptive, and Mom's Parkinson's care at Meadowbrook is specifically tailored to her needs. Olivia, we need to be realistic about the financial situation. Premium care is simply not sustainable long-term." "That's where we disagree," I replied calmly. "I've secured funding to maintain their current care arrangement." A pause on the line. "What funding? You mentioned that in your text, but didn't explain." "I've taken on professional projects that will cover the shortfall. Additionally, I've discovered that Dad established a separate trust with rental property income that will contribute substantially." Another longer pause. When Emma spoke again, her voice had a sharper edge. "What separate trust? What rental property?" "The Lake Henderson cabin. It's been generating rental income for years, managed through a property trust Dad established outside of the assets he transferred to you." "That's..." she faltered momentarily. "That's not possible. Dad put everything in my name for management." "He would have mentioned another property." "Apparently not," I said. "The trust documentation is quite clear. Dad named me successor trustee 18 months ago, anticipating he might become incapacitated." The silence that followed was charged with tension. I could almost hear Emma recalculating her approach. "So you've found a secret pot of money," she finally said. "That's convenient. But it doesn't change the fact that the care costs are exorbitant. Even with rental income, you'll eventually deplete those funds too." "That's why I've developed additional income streams," I explained. "I've contracted for curriculum development, work that will provide significant compensation, and I'm a finalist for a national teaching grant." "Wait, you're telling me you're suddenly making enough from teaching to cover nursing home bills? That's hard to believe." The skepticism in her voice reflected her persistent underestimation of my capabilities, a perspective I once might have internalized. Now it merely reinforced my determination. "I'm leveraging my educational expertise in ways that command appropriate compensation," I said. "The curriculum project alone will generate $85,000 over the next 4 months." $85,000? Emma couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "For curriculum development?" Educational content has significant commercial value when properly positioned, something I've only recently come to fully appreciate myself. Emma's tone shifted, becoming more conciliatory. "Well, that's impressive, Olivia. I had no idea teaching could be so lucrative. Maybe we should rethink our approach here. If you're bringing in that kind of money, perhaps we could collaborate on managing their care." The abrupt pivot was transparent. Now that she realized there was money to be managed, Emma wanted to insert herself back into the equation. "I'm handling their care arrangements moving forward," I said firmly. The trust income is specifically designated for that purpose, and my additional earnings will ensure their needs are fully met. Don't you think we should make these decisions together? We're both their daughters. That opportunity existed before you misappropriated their assets and abandoned your responsibilities, I said, keeping my voice leveled despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. I've stepped in to address the crisis you created, and I'll continue to manage their care based on their needs, not financial convenience. That's not fair, Olivia. I made investment decisions that didn't work out as planned. It wasn't intentional. You used their money to buy yourself a beachfront condo while they needed those funds for essential care. That goes beyond a failed investment strategy. The condo was part of a diversified portfolio approach, she insisted, and I still maintain it has appreciated in value. In your name, not theirs, I pointed out. If you're truly concerned about their welfare, you could sell the condo and use those funds to repay what was meant for their care. Her response was immediate and defensive. That's not realistic. I have the mortgage to consider, and selling in this market would be financially irresponsible. More irresponsible than leaving our parents without funds for necessary medical care? Emma sighed dramatically. Look, I acknowledge that the situation isn't ideal, but what's done is done. We need to focus on solutions moving forward. That's exactly what I'm doing, I replied. I've secured the necessary funding to maintain their care at Meadowbrook. I've established myself as their financial and medical point of contact, and I've created a sustainable plan for their ongoing needs. Without any consultation with me? Emma noted, an edge of resentment in her voice. Just as you made investment decisions with their money without consulting me? I countered. The difference is that my decisions prioritize their well-being rather than my personal gain. The conversation continued in this vein for another 20 minutes, Emma alternating between defensive justification of her actions and attempts to reassert control over the situation. I remained firm in my position, neither yielding to her manipulation nor escalating into unproductive accusation. Finally, sensing she wouldn't regain financial influence, Emma shifted tactics. Well, if you're so determined to handle everything yourself, I suppose that includes the tax implications of their care expenses. What tax implications specifically? I asked, alert to her tone. The equity from the house sale has certain capital gains considerations, and there could be gift tax issues depending on how the funds were structured, not to mention potential inheritance tax planning. Her voice took on the authoritative tone she used when leveraging her financial expertise. These are complex matters that require someone with accounting knowledge. I had anticipated this approach, Emma highlighting areas where her professional background gave her advantage. I've already consulted with an elder care financial advisor, I said. They're reviewing all tax and estate implications and will ensure everything is properly managed. This wasn't entirely true yet. I had researched advisors but hadn't scheduled a consultation. Nevertheless, it was my next step, and I wouldn't allow Emma to use perceived knowledge gaps to wedge herself back into control. I see you've thought of everything, Emma said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Not everything, I admitted, but I'm addressing each challenge methodically, just as I've always done. After another moment of tense silence, Emma sighed. Well, it seems you don't need my input after all. Just keep me informed about their health at least. I will, I agreed. And Emma, if you'd like to visit them sometime, I'm sure they'd appreciate seeing you. Dad asks about you. Her response was non-committal. I'll try to arrange something when my schedule allows. Things are particularly busy with work right now. After ending the call, I sat motionless at my kitchen table, processing the interaction. Emma's rapid shift from suggesting a cheaper facility to seeking involvement once she learned about additional funds confirmed what I'd already suspected. Her primary concern remained financial opportunity, not our parents' welfare. The exchange had been draining but clarifying. I now understood that I couldn't expect meaningful support from Emma, but I also recognized that I didn't need it. The resources and capabilities I was assembling would be sufficient to meet the challenges ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. How did the sister showdown go? About as expected, I replied. Tried to take control once she learned there was money, backed off when she realized I wasn't yielding. No surprise there. Working on the 10th grade lit sequence. Tonight, making good progress. We'll send draft by morning. Thanks. You're a lifesaver. I closed my phone and opened my laptop to review the grant presentation outline I'd been developing. The National Teacher Grant Finalists presentations were scheduled in 2 weeks, requiring me to prepare a compelling case for my curriculum innovation project. The grant committee consisted of education leaders, philanthropists, and previous recipients, a discerning audience that would expect both theoretical foundation and practical application. My project proposed integrating classic literature with digital media production, teaching students to translate literary analysis into contemporary digital storytelling formats. The approach leveraged students' comfort with digital communication while developing traditional critical thinking and analytical skills. As I refined my presentation slides, I realized how much my recent experiences were influencing my perspective on education. The undervaluation of my teaching expertise by Emma reflected broader societal patterns that diminished educational work, patterns I was now actively challenging through my curriculum development and grant pursuit. This wasn't just about securing funds for my parents' care anymore. It had evolved into a reclamation of professional worth, a recognition that the skills I'd developed in a traditionally undercompensated field had significant value when appropriately positioned. The next morning, I met with the elder care financial advisor I'd researched. Miranda Okafor had 20 years of experience in estate planning with a specialization in long-term care financing. Her office was warm and inviting, with comfortable seating and soft lighting that suggested understanding of the emotional dimensions of her work. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, I said as we settled into our consultation. Your situation merits prompt attention, she replied, reviewing the summary of circumstances I'd emailed the previous evening. Let me ensure I understand correctly. Your parents transferred most of their assets to your sister for management. Those assets have been significantly depleted, and you've recently assumed responsibility for their care expenses using a combination of a previously unknown trust, rental income, and your own expanded professional earnings. That's an accurate summary, I confirmed. And your immediate concern is ensuring their continued care while maximizing any available financial protections or benefits. Yes, along with understanding any potential tax or legal implications I should be aware of. Miranda nodded thoughtfully. Let's start with the trust containing the rental property. Based on the documentation you've provided, your father established this as an irrevocable trust specifically for care expenses. That was prescient planning on his part. He seems to have had concerns about how the rest of their assets would be managed, I said carefully. Such concerns are not uncommon when multiple family members are involved in elder care decisions, she observed diplomatically. The trust structure provides several advantages in your situation. First, since it was established more than 5 years ago, it's outside the Medicaid look-back period should that ever become relevant. Second, as an irrevocable trust with specified purpose, it's protected from potential creditors. What about the tax implications Emma mentioned? Capital gains and gift taxes? The house sale would indeed have capital gains considerations, but those would have been addressed at the time of sale, Miranda explained. As for gift taxes, your parents' transfer of assets to your sister would only have tax implications if they exceeded the lifetime gift tax exemption, which is currently quite substantial. Without seeing their complete financial records, I can't determine if thresholds were approached, but it's something we can investigate if necessary. The conversation continued for over an hour, covering Medicare benefits, potential VA benefits, Since my father had served briefly in the military, tax deductions for medical expenses, and long-term planning considerations. Miranda was thorough and clear, making complex financial concepts accessible without being condescending. Based on everything we've discussed, she concluded, I believe your current approach is sound. The combination of trust income, your supplemental earnings, and potential grants creates a viable financial framework for your parents' continued care. There are some optimizations we could explore, particularly regarding income tax deductions for medical expenses and possibly restructuring how you contribute to their care costs. What would that restructuring involve? Rather than paying the facility directly for the portion not covered by the trust, you might establish a personal care agreement that formalizes your role in compensation. This creates a clearer tax position for both you and your parents. That sounds sensible, I agreed. What documentation would we need? I can prepare a draft agreement based on standard elder care protocols. Then you can review it with your parents, or on their behalf, if they're not capable of making financial decisions. Would you like to proceed with that? Yes, please. And I'd also like to discuss establishing a more comprehensive long-term care plan. While I'm managing current expenses, I want to ensure there's a sustainable structure in place regardless of how my own circumstances might change. Miranda smiled with approval. That's exactly the kind of forward thinking that prevents crises. Let's schedule a follow-up session next week to develop that comprehensive plan. As I left her office, I felt a weight lifting. The financial aspects of my parents' care were coming into clearer focus, with professional guidance replacing anxious improvisation. The path ahead would still be challenging, but now had defined parameters and expert support. That afternoon, I received an email from Patricia at SmartLearn, requesting a progress update on the curriculum project. I had been documenting our development process meticulously, creating detailed outlines and sample units that demonstrated our approach. Melanie and I had established an efficient workflow, leveraging her AP literature expertise for the upper level content while I focused on the framework and digital integration components. I sent Patricia a comprehensive update with sample materials and a revised timeline. Her response came within hours. Exceptional work, Olivia. The framework you're developing exceeds our expectations in both pedagogical sophistication and practical applicability. The district representatives are particularly impressed with the assessment tools you've designed. Would you be available for a virtual meeting next Tuesday to discuss expanding the scope to include teacher implementation guides? The request represented both opportunity and challenge, additional compensation, but also expanded workload. I consulted my project schedule before responding. I'd be happy to discuss expansion options. The implementation guides would certainly enhance the curriculum's effectiveness. Tuesday at 2 p.m. works for my schedule. This exchange reflected a significant shift in my professional interactions. Where I had once focused primarily on meeting expectations, I was now confidently negotiating expanded opportunities, recognizing the value of my expertise and maintaining boundaries around scope and compensation. The rest of the week maintained its intensive pace, teaching during school hours, curriculum development in the evenings, grant presentation preparation on Wednesday night, and parent visits Thursday and Sunday. Melanie and I met Saturday morning to align our curriculum components and address integration points between the grade levels. You know, Melanie observed as we worked, there's something different about your approach to this project compared to previous collaborations. What do you mean? I asked, looking up from my laptop. You're more authoritative, less hesitant about asserting your vision. It's a good change. She studied me thoughtfully. This situation with your parents and sister, it's awful, of course, but it seems to have catalyzed something in you professionally. Her observation resonated with my own internal awareness. I think I'm finally recognizing the value of what I know and what I can create, I admitted. For years, I accepted the narrative that teaching was a calling rather than a career with measurable value. The two aren't mutually exclusive, Melanie pointed out. The most valuable professional contributions often emerge from genuine passion and commitment. True, but I allowed the calling framing to justify undervaluing my expertise, I said. When Emma dismissed my career choices as lacking ambition, she was articulating something I had partially internalized myself, that choosing meaningful work somehow meant accepting limited professional growth or compensation. And now? I gestured to our curriculum materials spread across the table. Now I see that the pedagogical knowledge I've developed over 15 years has significant commercial and practical value. The challenge was finding the right contexts to leverage it, not the expertise itself. Exactly, Melanie nodded emphatically. The market consistently undervalues educational expertise while simultaneously depending on it. Breaking out of that pattern requires exactly what you're doing, recognizing where your knowledge intersects with market needs and positioning yourself accordingly. The conversation shifted back to curriculum development, but Melanie's observations lingered in my thoughts. The financial crisis precipitated by Emma's mismanagement had forced me to reconceptualize my professional identity and potential, opening possibilities I might never have explored otherwise. Sunday afternoon found me at Meadowbrook, sitting, with Mom in the garden courtyard while Dad participated in a memory care group activity. Her tremors were moderate today, allowing her to hold a cup of tea with only occasional spilling. The spring weather had brought color back to her cheeks, and she seemed more present than she had in weeks. "You look tired," she observed, her eyes sharp despite her physical limitations. "You're taking on too much." "I'm managing," I assured her. "Just juggling several projects simultaneously. This curriculum work you mentioned, is it fulfilling or just financially necessary?" The question was quintessential Mom, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "Both, surprisingly," I answered honestly. "It's challenging me to think beyond my classroom, to synthesize everything I've learned about effective teaching into something that could impact thousands of students." She nodded slowly. "That sounds like genuinely meaningful work. I worried you might be sacrificing your professional satisfaction for our sake. Actually, I think this situation has pushed me to recognize opportunities I might have overlooked. Otherwise," I said, "I've been so focused on my classroom that I didn't consider how my expertise could be applied more broadly. Your father and I always thought you had potential beyond what you were pursuing," Mom admitted. "But we didn't want to impose our expectations. We'd done enough of that with Emma, always pushing her toward achievement and recognition." This was a surprising admission, that they had consciously modulated their expectations for me. "Did you think I lacked ambition?" I asked, curious rather than defensive. Mom shook her head carefully. "Not ambition, just a different kind of drive. Emma always needed external validation, achievements that others would recognize and admire. You seemed content with the internal satisfaction of doing meaningful work well, regardless of whether it garnered attention." She paused, considering. "We worried sometimes that you might be limiting yourself, but we respected that you seemed to have found purpose in teaching." The insight into my parents' perception was both illuminating and slightly unsettling. They had seen me more clearly than I realized, recognizing both my strengths and my self-imposed limitations. "I think I was limiting myself," I acknowledged. "Not because teaching isn't valuable work, but because I didn't recognize how my expertise could extend beyond my classroom. I accepted the cultural narrative that teaching is important, but not prestigious or lucrative." "And now?" Mom asked. "Now I'm discovering that educational expertise, properly positioned, commands both respect and appropriate compensation. The knowledge I've developed over 15 years has significant value. I just needed to find the right contexts to apply it." Mom smiled, a genuine expression that momentarily transcended her Parkinson's mask. "That's what your father and I hoped you'd eventually discover." Not that you needed a different career, but that you'd find ways to amplify your impact and be recognized for your capabilities. We sat quietly for a moment, the spring breeze rustling through the courtyard. Garden. I had spent years assuming my parents viewed my career choice as less impressive than Emma's business trajectory, when in reality, they had simply been waiting for me to recognize my own potential. I should tell you, I said finally. I'm meeting with a financial advisor to establish a more formal structure for your care expenses. There's a personal care agreement she's recommended that would clarify the financial arrangements. Mom nodded. That sounds prudent. Your father always appreciated clear documentation. She hesitated. Have you heard from Emma recently? We spoke last week. She suggested moving you to a less expensive facility. Mom's expression hardened slightly. And what did you tell her? That it wasn't an option I would consider. Your care needs are being met here, and disruption would be detrimental, especially for Dad. Thank you, she said simply. This is our home now, such as it is. The staff knows us, and your father finds comfort in the routines. I know, I assured her. You're staying right here. As we continued our conversation, touching on lighter topics, the book she was currently reading, the birds that visited the garden feeders, my students' latest creative projects, I felt a deepening appreciation for these moments together. Despite the financial strain and professional juggling, these visits remained the emotional anchor that gave meaning to all my efforts. Dad joined us later, wheeled out by an activities coordinator who reported he had participated enthusiastically in the memory exercises. He was having one of his better days, recognizing me immediately and asking coherent questions about my week. I shared simplified updates about my curriculum project and upcoming grant presentation, which he followed with evident interest and pride. As our visit concluded, a nursing assistant approached with medication for both parents. You have the most dedicated daughter, she commented to Mom while dispensing pills. Never misses a visit. She's always been reliable, Mom replied, her eyes meeting mine with quiet understanding. Even when we didn't fully appreciate it. Driving home, I reflected on the evolution of my relationship with my parents, how crisis had clarified the strength of our connection while revealing previously unspoken dynamics. The financial catastrophe engineered by Emma had paradoxically created space for deeper mutual recognition between my parents and me, a recalibration of understanding that might never have occurred otherwise. That evening, as I prepared my classroom materials for the coming week, while simultaneously refining my grant presentation, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. Ms. Bennett, this is Anthony Russo from Lake Property Management. There's been an issue with the cabin that requires immediate attention. Please call when convenient. Concern immediately replaced my contemplative mood. The rental income from the cabin was a crucial component of my financial strategy for my parents' care. Any disruption to that revenue stream could jeopardize the delicate balance I was maintaining. I called Mr. Russo immediately, bracing myself for potentially complicated news that would require yet another adjustment to my already complex plans. The path forward, I was learning, rarely remained smooth for long, no matter how carefully charted. Mr. Russo, this is Olivia Bennett. I got your message about an issue with the cabin. What's happened? I asked, trying to keep the anxiety from my voice. Ms. Bennett, thank you for calling back so promptly, he replied. I wanted to inform you that there's been a substantial water leak at the property. A pipe burst in the utility room while the tenants were away for the weekend. My stomach dropped. How bad is the damage? The property management company's emergency response team contained it relatively quickly, but there's significant water damage to the utility room, hallway, and one of the bedrooms. The current tenants can't remain in the property while repairs are underway. I see, I said, my mind already calculating the financial implications. What's the estimated timeline for repairs, and what happens with the rental income during this period? That's actually why I wanted to speak with you directly, Mr. Russo said, his tone shifting. We've had a rather unexpected development. The owner of the neighboring property, Mr. Lawrence Keller, contacted us after learning about the damage. He's expressed interest in purchasing the cabin. This was the last thing I'd expected. Purchasing? But it's not listed for sale. Correct. This would be a private sale if you were interested. Mr. Keller has been trying to acquire adjacent properties on the lake for some time. He's prepared to make what I believe is a very generous offer, especially considering the current damage. I sat down at my kitchen table, trying to process this new complication. What kind of offer are we talking about? $875,000 as is. No repairs needed on your part. He would handle all restoration work himself as part of his larger renovation. Plans for the combined properties. The figure stunned me into momentary silence. Based on the property assessment in my father's portfolio, the cabin had been valued at approximately $650,000 before the water damage. That seems substantially above market value, I finally managed. It is, Mr. Russo confirmed. Mr. Keller has been assembling lakefront properties to create a larger family compound. Your parents' cabin is particularly valuable to him because of its location and water rights. He's willing to pay a premium to complete his vision. My mind raced with calculations. The cabin currently generated about $34,000 annually in rental income, an important contribution to my parents' care expenses, but not enough on its own. A lump sum of $875,000, properly invested, could potentially generate more sustainable long-term support while eliminating the risks of property ownership. I would need to think about this carefully, I said. The rental income is currently supporting my parents' care facility expenses. Of course, Mr. Russo said. Mr. Keller is aware of your situation. I hope you don't mind that I mentioned the general circumstances, and he's prepared to be flexible with the closing timeline to accommodate your financial planning needs. How did the water damage occur exactly? I asked, suddenly suspicious that this convenient offer might be connected to the property damage. A failed valve in the water heater system, Mr. Russo explained. We have the plumber's report and photos documenting everything. It's unfortunately a common issue in properties of this age. The insurance adjuster has already been out to assess the damage. The explanation seemed legitimate, but the timing remained convenient. And the current tenants? What happens with their lease? Their renter's insurance will cover temporary housing while they decide whether to wait for repairs or terminate the lease early. If they choose to terminate, they would be entitled to their security deposit back in full, given the circumstances. I need time to consider this, I said, and I'd want to speak with a real estate attorney before making any decisions. Completely. Understandable, Mr. Russo agreed. Mr. Keller is prepared to keep this offer open for 2 weeks to give you adequate time for consideration and consultation. Shall I have his formal offer sent to you? Yes, please email it to me. And I'd also like the full damage assessment and repair estimates. After ending the call, I sat motionless at my kitchen table, trying to make sense of this unexpected development. The cabin had been a financial lifeline when I discovered its existence, and now its value had potentially increased dramatically through pure chance. The timing seemed almost too fortuitous, raising my natural skepticism. I called Miranda Okafor, the elder care financial advisor, despite the late hour. Her voicemail indicated she would return calls the next business day, so I left a detailed message explaining the situation and requesting her insights on how a potential property sale might be structured to best support my parents' long-term care needs. Next, I researched real estate attorneys specializing in lakefront properties and sent inquiry emails to 3 highly rated firms. The situation required expert guidance beyond my knowledge, particularly given the trust structure my father had established. Sleep came fitfully that night, my mind continuously cycling through scenarios and calculations. By morning, I had formulated a preliminary plan, contingent on professional advice. If the offer was legitimate and the sale advisable, the proceeds could potentially be structured to generate more stable income for my parents' care than the rental property provided, while eliminating maintenance costs and vacancy risks. The next day passed in a blur of teaching, curriculum development, and hurried phone calls during breaks. Miranda returned my call during my planning period, her practical approach immediately calming my scattered thoughts. "This could be extremely beneficial if structured properly," she said after I explained the situation. "A lump sum of that magnitude, invested in an appropriate mix of income-generating vehicles, could provide substantially more monthly support than the rental income alone." "That's what I was thinking," I agreed. "But I'm concerned about preserving the trust protection my father established. Would selling the property compromise that?" "Not necessarily. The proceeds from the sale would remain within the trust, simply changing form from real estate to financial assets. The key is ensuring the sale is properly handled as a trust transaction rather than a personal one." "And what about tax implications?" "There would be capital gains considerations, but the trust structure provides some advantages there as well. Your father's basis in the property would carry over, and there might be exclusions available given the circumstances. I'd want to coordinate with the real estate attorney you select to optimize the approach." Her confidence was reassuring. "How quickly could this be arranged if I decide to proceed?" "From a financial planning perspective, we could implement a new investment strategy for the proceeds within days of closing. The real estate transaction timeline would be the determining factor." "And what would you recommend for the investment approach?" "Given your parents' care needs and time horizon, I'd suggest a conservative income-focused portfolio, primarily high-quality bonds, dividend-producing equities, and perhaps some annuity components to ensure consistent monthly distributions. We'd aim for minimizing risk while generating reliable income streams." By the end of the day, I had scheduled consultations with 2 real estate attorneys and received Mr. Keller's formal offer via email. The terms were straightforward: $875,000 for the property as is, with flexible closing terms to accommodate my timeline. A $25,000 earnest money deposit would be placed in escrow upon acceptance, with the ability to rent back to the current tenants under Keller's ownership if I wished to maintain continuity of income during the transition. That evening, Melanie arrived for our scheduled curriculum work session to find me surrounded by property documents, financial projections, and legal notes. "I'm sensing a plot twist in the ongoing saga," she observed, setting down her laptop. "Bag." I explained the unexpected offer and my efforts to determine the best course of action. "It feels too convenient somehow," I admitted. "Just as I discover this property exists, suddenly there's a water leak and an above-market offer." Melanie considered this. "Have you verified this Keller person is legitimate? That he actually owns neighboring properties?" "Not yet, but that's on my list for the real estate attorney to investigate." "Smart," she nodded. "Though even if everything checks out, I understand your hesitation. The cabin was a connection to your father's foresight and planning, a safety net he created specifically for this situation." Her observation captured something I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. The cabin represented more than financial security. It was tangible evidence of my father's concern and protection, established during a time when his mind was still sharp and his judgment sound. Selling means converting his specific provision into something more abstract, I acknowledged. Though potentially more beneficial in practical terms. "It's okay to have mixed feelings about that," Melanie said gently. "Financial decisions are rarely just about the numbers, especially when family is involved." We shifted to our curriculum work, making substantial progress on the digital integration components for the 10th grade units. My focus improved as the evening progressed, the familiar territory of educational planning providing temporary respite from the property decision looming over me. The following afternoon, I met with Catherine Jimenez, a real estate attorney specializing in waterfront properties and trust transactions. Her office overlooked the city park, the spring foliage visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. She had reviewed the documents I'd forwarded prior to our meeting. "I've researched Mr. Lawrence Keller," she began after preliminaries. "He appears to be legitimate, a tech entrepreneur who sold his company 5 years ago and has indeed been assembling adjacent properties on Lake Henderson. County records confirm he owns the 2 parcels bordering your parents' cabin." "That's somewhat reassuring," I said, "though the timing still seems convenient." Catherine smiled. "Healthy skepticism serves you well in real estate transactions. I've reviewed the plumber's report and insurance adjuster's assessment. The water damage appears to be genuine and consistent with the type of failure described. There's no evidence suggesting sabotage or deliberate flooding." "And the offer itself? Is $875,000 reasonable given the circumstances?" "Based on recent comparable sales in the area, without water damage, similar properties are selling in the $680,000 to $720,000 range. Factor in the necessary repairs estimated at $45,000 to $60,000, and Mr. Keller's offer represents a significant premium. His motivation aligns with established patterns of property assemblage, where buyers often pay above market for parcels that complete their desired holdings." Her analysis matched my research, but carried the weight of professional expertise. If I decide to proceed, what would the process look like, given the trust structure? "As successor trustee, you have the authority to sell trust assets provided the proceeds remain within the trust and are managed according to the trust's stated purpose. In this case, your parents' care," Catherine explained. "We would structure the sale as a trust transaction, with proceeds deposited directly to a trust account rather than passing through personal accounts." "And the timeline?" "Given the motivated buyer and as-is condition, we could potentially close within 30 days of acceptance. However, Mr. Keller has indicated flexibility, so we could negotiate a schedule that aligns with your financial planning needs." After discussing additional legal considerations and transaction costs, I left Catherine's office with greater confidence in the legitimacy of the offer, but still conflicted about the decision itself. The attorney had confirmed what the financial advisor suggested, that selling could potentially provide greater stability and income for my parents' care than maintaining the rental property. Yet something continued to hold me back from immediate acceptance. That evening, I visited my parents, determined to include them in the decision to whatever extent possible. Mom was having a difficult day, her tremors more pronounced than usual, but her mind remained clear. Dad was in one of his more lucid periods, recognizing me immediately when I entered their room. "There's my Livy," he greeted me warmly. "What? Brings you here on a Tuesday? Usually it's your busy curriculum night." The fact that he remembered my typical schedule was encouraging. "I wanted to discuss something important with both of you," I explained, pulling a chair between their seats. "It's about the Lake Henderson cabin." Mom's attention sharpened visibly. "Has something happened with the property?" I explained the water damage situation and the subsequent purchase offer, carefully gauging their reactions. Dad seemed to follow the explanation, though he occasionally glanced at Mom as if confirming his understanding. $875,000? He repeated when I mentioned the offer amount. "That's substantially above what we paid, even with improvements." "It is," I confirmed. "The buyer owns adjacent properties and wants to create a family compound." "Lawrence Keller," Dad said unexpectedly. "The tech fellow who bought the Wilsons' place 2 years ago." His recollection startled me. "Yes, that's right. Do you know him?" Dad's brow furrowed with concentration. "Met him once at the lake. Seemed decent enough. Very focused on his vision for the property. Mentioned he'd be interested if we ever decided to sell." He looked at Mom. "Remember, Martha, at the Owners Association picnic?" Mom nodded slowly. "I remember. Very polite man with grand plans. said our cabin had the best sunrise view on that stretch of shoreline. Their shared recollection reassured me about the legitimacy of the offer, while reminding me that the cabin held memories for them beyond its financial value. I wanted to discuss this with you before making any decisions, I said. The property was set aside specifically for your care needs. And it's serving that purpose now, Mom observed. But you're wondering if selling might be the wiser course. The financial advisor believes we could generate more stable monthly income from the sale proceeds than from rental income alone, I explained. But I'm hesitant to sell something Dad so carefully preserved. Dad reached for my hand, his grip surprisingly firm. The cabin was never about the property itself, Livy. It was about ensuring security for your mother and me if something went wrong with our other arrangements. His eyes, clear and present in this moment, held mine, steadily. Which it did. Your father always said the cabin was insurance, Mom added. Not a legacy to preserve for its own sake. So you think selling would be the right decision? I asked. They exchanged a glance laden with the understanding that comes from decades of partnership. If the financial people believe it creates better security for our care, then yes, Dad said. That was always the purpose. And what about your memories there? The family connections to the property? Mom smiled gently. Our memories don't reside in the building, dear. Besides, we haven't been able to visit for years now. She gestured to her trembling hands. These days, our home is where we are, now, and where you come to visit us. Their perspective clarified my own thinking. I had been approaching the decision partly from an emotional standpoint, seeing the cabin as a connection to my father's protection and foresight. But his own view was more pragmatic. The property had always been a means to an end, not an end in itself. There's one more consideration, I said. Emma doesn't know about this offer. Should I inform her before proceeding? Dad's expression hardened slightly. The trust names you as successor trustee, not Emma. The decision is legally yours. I understand that, I acknowledged, but from a family perspective. From a family perspective, Mom interjected gently. Emma relinquished her role in our care when she misappropriated the resources entrusted to her. This property was specifically kept separate from her influence. Your father and I support whatever decision you believe best serves our needs. Their united perspective settled something within me. The cabin had been established as protection against exactly the situation that had transpired, Emma's mismanagement of their primary assets. Using it now as effectively as possible aligned perfectly with my father's original intent. Thank you both, I said, squeezing Dad's hand. I'll consult with the financial advisor and attorney to structure the sale optimally for your ongoing care. As I prepared to leave, Dad called me back. Livy, there's something else you should know. His voice had the urgent quality it took on when he was fighting to articulate a thought before it slipped away. The trust. There are provisions we didn't discuss, papers in the safe deposit box, key in my desk at home. Mom nodded. He's right. There are additional trust documents you should review before finalizing anything. What kind of provisions? I asked. Dad's focus was already beginning to drift, the lucidity of the past hour fading. Protections, contingencies. Martha knows. Mom reached for my hand. The original trust attorney was James Littleton. His contact information should be with the papers. He can explain the provisions your father is referring to. That night, I located the key in my father's home office. Desk, now part of the condo Emma had purchased with their money. The irony of retrieving the key to access documents that had been specifically protected from Emma's control, from the house she now owned, wasn't lost on me. The following day, I visited the bank where my parents had maintained accounts for decades. The safe deposit box contained additional legal documents related to the trust, including provisions I hadn't been aware of. One clause specifically addressed the potential sale of the property, stipulating that proceeds would remain within the trust but could be invested according to the trustee's judgment to best meet the grantor's care needs. More surprisingly, a separate document established a secondary trust that would activate upon sale of the property, designating a small portion, 15% of the proceeds, for my own security. In recognition of the successor trustee's assumption of responsibility for the grantor's care and associated impact on the trustee's professional and financial circumstances, the provision read, "This revelation was emotionally complex. My father had anticipated not only their potential care needs, but also the personal and financial impact on me of assuming responsibility for them. The allocation wasn't substantive enough to meaningfully change my circumstances, but the recognition of potential sacrifice touched me deeply. I contacted James Littleton, now semi-retired but still consulting on estate matters. He remembered my parents well and arranged to meet me the following afternoon. His insights into my father's intentions in establishing the trust confirmed what I had already begun to understand, that the cabin had always been conceived as a financial safety, net rather than a legacy property. Your father was remarkably prescient," Littleton observed. He expressed concerns about concentrated decision-making regarding their assets several years ago, though he never specifically mentioned your sister by name. And the provision allocating a portion of sale proceeds to me. That was added during the amendment process 18 months ago, Littleton explained. Your father was quite insistent about it, saying it was only fair given the responsibilities you would likely assume. Armed with this additional information and professional guidance, I made my decision. I would accept Mr. Keller's offer for the Lake Henderson cabin, structuring the sale to optimize support for my parents' ongoing care while honoring my father's explicit intentions for the property. The next steps unfolded with surprising efficiency. Catherine Jimenez handled the legal aspects of the transaction, while Miranda Okafor developed an investment strategy for the proceeds that would generate approximately $3,500 monthly, significantly more than the rental income, with greater stability and without property management concerns. Within 3 weeks, we had moved from initial offer to signed contract, with closing scheduled for 30 days later. The transaction included a provision allowing the current tenants to complete their lease term under the new ownership if they chose, providing continuity for them while removing administrative responsibilities from my purview. Throughout this process, I continued balancing teaching responsibilities, curriculum development work, and grant presentation preparation. The approaching finalist presentation for the National Teacher Grant for Educational Innovation remained a significant focus, with potential to further stabilize my parents' financial situation while advancing my professional goals. The day before my scheduled grant presentation, I received an unexpected text from Emma. Heard through the family. Grapevine that you're selling a lake house I didn't know existed. Call me. I had deliberately not informed her about the cabin sale, respecting my parents' wishes regarding the property they had specifically kept separate from her control. The fact that she had learned about it, likely through extended family with connections to the Lake Henderson community, was irritating but not entirely surprising. Rather than calling immediately, I finished preparing my presentation materials for the following day, then texted back, "In meetings all day. Can talk. Tomorrow evening after my grant presentation." Her response was immediate. "This affects family assets. We should discuss before you proceed." I maintained my boundary. The transaction is already in process, with full legal authority as successor trustee and with Mom and Dad's explicit approval. Happy to explain the details tomorrow evening. No response followed, which I interpreted as frustrated acquiescence. Emma's attempts to reassert control were becoming predictable, though no less taxing emotionally. Each interaction required conscious effort to maintain boundaries without escalating conflict, a balancing act that drained energy I needed for my professional commitments. That night, I rehearsed my grant presentation one final time, timing each section and refining transitions. The project proposed integrating classic literature analysis with digital media production, teaching students to translate literary interpretation into contemporary storytelling formats through podcasts, video essays, and interactive presentations. The approach leveraged students' comfort with digital communication while developing traditional critical thinking skills. The $75,000 grant would fund technology resources, professional development for faculty, and curriculum implementation across my school district. While initially conceived as a pedagogical innovation before my parents' financial crisis emerged, it now represented both professional advancement and potential financial stability. As I prepared for bed, I reviewed the journey of the past months, from the shock of the nursing home bill to my current position managing multiple professional opportunities while restructuring my parents' financial support. The path had been neither straight nor easy, yet each challenge had revealed capabilities I hadn't fully recognized in myself. Emma's dismissal of my career choices as lacking ambition had contained a kernel of truth, though not in the way she intended. I had indeed limited myself, not by choosing teaching as a profession, but by accepting external definitions of what that profession could encompass. The financial crisis precipitated by her mismanagement had paradoxically liberated me from those constraints, forcing me to recognize and leverage the market value of my pedagogical expertise. Tomorrow's grant presentation represented the convergence of these realizations, an opportunity to expand my professional impact while securing additional resources for my parents' care. Whatever the outcome, the process of reaching this point had fundamentally altered my understanding of my own potential. With that thought providing unexpected calm, I closed my presentation materials and prepared for sleep, ready to face the culmination of weeks of preparation and years of professional development. The morning of my grant presentation dawned clear and bright, a perfect spring day that seemed to mirror my cautious optimism. I arrived at school early to finalize my teaching materials for the day, ensuring my students wouldn't be shortchanged despite my afternoon absence for the presentation. Principal Garcia stopped by my classroom during first period. "Just wanted to wish you luck today," he said quietly as my students worked on their analysis essays. "The district is pulling for you." "Thank you," I replied, touched by the show of support. "I'll do my best to represent Roosevelt well." "You'll be representing yourself, Olivia?" he corrected gently. "And that's more than enough." His words stayed with me throughout the morning, a reminder that this presentation wasn't just about securing funding or advancing institutional goals, but about demonstrating the value of my own professional vision and expertise. During lunch, I changed into the professional attire I'd selected for the presentation, a tailored navy suit that projected confidence without ostentation. Several colleagues stopped by to offer encouragement, their genuine support, another reminder of the professional community I'd built over 15 years of teaching. "Ms. Bennett, are you leaving us?" asked Miguel, one of my most perceptive seniors, as he entered the classroom for sixth period. "Just for the afternoon," I assured him. "I have a presentation for a national education grant." "Is this for that digital literature project you mentioned?" Aisha asked from her seat by the window. "It is. If we receive the funding, you might be invited to participate in the pilot implementation before you graduate." Miguel grinned. "Make sure you tell them about how we analyzed The Great Gatsby through TikTok formats. That project was fire." I smiled at his enthusiasm. That's actually one of my examples of how traditional literary analysis can be translated into contemporary media contexts. As the substitute teacher arrived to supervise my final period, I gathered my presentation materials and headed to the district office where the grant committee would be conducting virtual interviews with finalists. The technology had been tested the previous day, the presentation space prepared with professional lighting and sound equipment to ensure optimal communication. "Nervous?" asked Dr. Kaminsky, the district's curriculum director, as we waited for the committee to connect. Focused, I replied, surprising myself with the accuracy of the word. Nervousness implied doubt, and while I recognized the competitive nature of the grant process, I felt a solid confidence in both my project and my ability to communicate its value. The video conference connected precisely on schedule, revealing a panel of 7 individuals, 3 educators, 2 philanthropic foundation representatives, a technology integration specialist, and a previous grant recipient. The format was straightforward: 15 minutes for my presentation, followed by 10 minutes of questions from the committee. As I began speaking, the weeks of preparation translated into fluid articulation of my vision. I outlined the pedagogical foundation, the marriage of traditional literary analysis with contemporary digital storytelling, followed by implementation methodology, assessment frameworks, and scalability potential. Sample projects from my current students demonstrated the approach in action, while research data supported the efficacy of bridging canonical texts with digital media production. Throughout the presentation, I maintained steady eye contact with the camera, modulating my voice for emphasis and clarity. The concerns that had occupied so much of my mental energy recently, my parents' care, Emma's interference, the property sale, receded temporarily, allowing full presence in this professional moment. When I concluded precisely at the 15-minute mark, the committee chair, Dr. Eleanor Rivera, a renowned education researcher, smiled approvingly. "Thank you, Ms. Bennett. That was remarkably comprehensive while remaining accessible, much like your project itself." The questions that followed were substantive and thought-provoking. How would the approach accommodate diverse learning needs? What professional development would teachers require to implement effectively? How would success be measured beyond engagement metrics? Each query allowed me to demonstrate the depth of thought behind the proposal, not merely a creative concept, but a thoroughly considered educational approach grounded in both research and classroom experience. As the final question concluded, I felt the satisfaction of having represented my professional vision with clarity and conviction. "Thank you for your time and consideration," I said as the session ended. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this project with you." "We appreciate your thoughtful proposal," Dr. Rivera responded. "Finalists will be notified of decisions within the next week." As the video connection ended, Dr. Kaminsky offered a thumbs up. "Outstanding presentation, Olivia. You've given them a lot to think about." "Do you think we have a chance?" I asked, beginning to gather my materials. "Better than a chance," he replied confidently. "Your proposal bridges traditional academic values with contemporary student engagement, exactly the kind of innovation educational foundations are eager to support. Plus, your presentation skills are impeccable." His assessment aligned with my own cautious optimism. Whatever the outcome, I had presented my best work with confidence and clarity, a professional milestone regardless of the funding decision. Checking my phone as I left the district office, I found several messages. Waiting. The first was from Catherine Jimenez, confirming that all conditions had been met for the cabin sale, and closing was on schedule for the following week. The second was from Meadowbrook's activities director, sharing photos of my parents enjoying a musical performance in the community room. The third was from Emma. "Still waiting to discuss the property situation. Call when you're done." I decided to address Emma's demand first, knowing it would continue to distract me until resolved. I called from my car, parked in the district office lot where I could have privacy for what would likely be a difficult conversation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.